Good day, everyone. Welcome to our first online class in Basic Mathematics 3. To start with, the learning objectives of this lesson are you'll be able to define statistics, define data and information, construct frequency distribution table, cumulative frequency, and relative frequency. Let's proceed. What is statistics? Statistics is a science of collecting, organizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting data to assist in making more effective decisions. In statistics, we collect data using survey or questionnaire. We present data using tables and graphs, and we summarize data through the use of sample mean, or you can also use mean or other measures central tendencies. And then let's have data analysis. In data analysis, we take into consideration two types of data, and that is ungrouped data, and the other one is grouped data. So, what are ungrouped data? These are data you first gathered from an experiment or study. The data is raw, that is, it's not sorted into categories or not classified. The other one is grouped data. This is the opposite of ungrouped. Naturally, it is the data that has been bundled together in categories. Now let's make frequency distribution table for ungrouped data. Now let's have this example. The set of data representing the marks obtained out of 100 by 30 students. So these are your observations here. You have 30 students, so 30 observations. The first step that you're going to do is arrange the marks in ascending order. So what is ascending order? That is from the least to the most, or from the lowest to the highest. So we arrange the marks. We have the lowest is 16, and we have 3 16s. So you write that. Then followed by 19, 25, 28, 35. And then we have 41, 45, 61, 75, until we reach the final observation, which is 85. And then the second step is identify the lowest and the highest values of the data set. In our example, we have the lowest and the highest values are 16 and 85 respectively. And then the third step is you are going to make a table with columns for marks, tally, frequency. So it should look like this. You have marks obtained, then you have tally, and then the number of students, which is your frequency. Then your frequency distribution table would look like this. The marks here, you have 16, 19, 25, and you just have to write it at once. 28, 35, 37, and so on to 85. And then you have the tally here. How many got 16? So you have 1, 2, 3. Then you'll just have to write that number 3 here for the frequency column. And then for 19, you have a tally here, which is 1, 2, 3. Then you will have a frequency of 3. You do that for the rest of the marks obtained. And then after that, you add the frequency column. The total is equal to 30, which is equal to your n. N here stands for the total number of observation in the data. Then let's have grouped frequency distribution table with the same problem that we have for ungrouped. The first step that you're going to do is select an interval size or class width so that you will have a 7 to 20 class intervals or number of classes. And this class width, you can find that by subtracting or getting the difference of your maximum score and your minimum score, and then add that to 1 divided by the number of classes that you choose. So in this example, we try to use, or we choose 7 to be our class interval. So your class width then would be 85 minus 16 plus 1 all over 7 gives you 10. So that is your class width. And then the next step is create a class interval. Create a class interval column and list each of the class interval. So you have here your class interval. Since our class width is 10, so you will start with the lowest observation, 16, and then just count 10 numbers include 16 in the counting. So you'll have 16 to 25. And then the second class interval is 26 to 35. See to it that your intervals will not overlap. And then you have 36 to 45, 46 to 55, and so on to 76 to 85. 85 here is your highest observation. If you try to count it, you have 7 class intervals. And then the next step is you create a tally column. This is optional. You may or you may not include, but for our convenience, we will just include that. So you have class interval and tally. So the first class interval, that is 16 to 25, all numbers that fall between 16 and 25 inclusive will be tallied here. And you do that for the rest of the class interval. And then the fourth step is you have to create a frequency column. So you have here your frequency column or the number of students. You will just count your tally and that is your frequency. So you have for the first class interval, you have 8, so you write 8. Then the next class interval, you have 5, so you write 5. Then you have 6, 2, 3, 5, and 1. And then the last step is you're going to write n, which is equal to the total value at the bottom of the frequency column. So you see here, that is the total number of observation, which is your n, or the total value, or the total number of students in this particular example. So your final grouped frequency distribution table for marks obtained by 30 students will look like this. Now let's have the cumulative grouped frequency distribution. What's the difference between grouped frequency distribution and the cumulative frequency distribution table? So for your cumulative group frequency distribution, you have a class interval column, then you have a frequency column, and then the cumulative frequency. I have here an additional column, which is your class mark, and this is obtained by adding the lower limit and the upper limit of your class interval divided by 2, and that is your class mark. I want you to remember how to get the class mark, because as we move along with our lesson, and we will be discussing mean, median, and mode, you need to know this. Then you have the frequency. We just copy that from our frequency before. And then the cumulative frequency part here. How we get the cumulative frequency of each interval? We just, for the first class interval, just copy the frequency to your cumulative frequency column. And then for the second class interval, you have a frequency of 5, add that to the frequency of the first interval, and that is the cumulative frequency of your second class interval. And that is 13. And then from there, the third class interval, which is 36 to 45, the cumulative frequency is 13 plus 6 gives you 19. And then you do that for the rest of the class intervals. So you have 19 plus 2 gives you 21. So 21 plus 3, that is 24. 24 plus 5, that is 29. And 29 plus 1, that gives you 30. So it's actually the cumulative frequency. It's just the sum of the frequencies of the previous interval and the present class interval. And then you will have, if you notice, the cumulative frequency here, 30 of the last class interval must be the same as the total number of frequency, or the sum of your frequencies here. Okay, so if your cumulative frequency of the last class interval is not the same as your number of n, or your n, then you have to go back to how you add all these numbers here, because there might be some errors that you have committed. Right? Now let's have relative frequency of a class. A relative frequency of a class is the frequency of the class divided by the total frequency of all classes. So if you are going to make a table for that, you will just add a column for relative frequency and then get the percentage of the relative frequency. Now, how to get the relative frequency? It's just frequency over the total number of frequencies. So for the first class interval, you have 8 over 30, and that is equal to 0.267. To get the percentage, just multiply 0.267 by 100, then you will get the percentage of relative frequency, which is 26.7%. You do the same to the other frequency class intervals, sorry. So you'll have 26 minus 35. This is the next class interval. Your relative frequency is 5 because 5 here, your frequency divided by 30, that is equal to 0.167. And then, of course, the percentage, just multiply this number by 100, you get 16.7. You continue the process until you finish the last class interval. Then we have the relative cumulative frequency. To find that, you divide each cumulative frequency of each interval by the total number of frequencies. So your table would look like this. You have column for class interval. You have column for your number of students, which is your frequency. You have column for your cumulative frequency. And then you have the relative cumulative frequency here, and of course the percentage of the relative cumulative frequency. So for example, our class interval is 16 to 25, or the first class interval. The cumulative frequency is 8, so that will be 8 divided by 30, which is equal to 0.267. And then the percentage of that is 26.7. Then the second class interval, you have 13 divided by 30 because your cumulative frequency is 13. And it gives you 43.3%, or the percentage of the relative cumulative frequency. And then you continue the process. You divide this column by 30. The last class interval will give you a cumulative frequency, relative cumulative frequency equal to 1, which is 100% if you get the percentage of the relative cumulative frequency. If you will not be able to get 100% here, then something is wrong with your computation from the previous class intervals. So I hope you understand that. Then let's have some activity for you to do. Activity 1. The numbers below represent the weight in pounds of fish caught in the competition. So what you're going to do is construct an ungrouped frequency distribution table, and then construct a grouped frequency distribution table, and construct a relative cumulative frequency table. You have to write your answer in an A4 paper and submit this paper when you come to school in July. Thank you for listening.